gonna go back to the mic. So now it is recording the voice, okay? But the earlier part is not as important, okay? So this is the actual important part of today's lecture. Okay, so we have a screen here. Now, when you do something like this, you can definitely tell that it will benefit from a horizontal, or what we call landscape orientation, because you have a list on the left-hand side, a list on the right-hand side, and then 2 buttons in between. But we can still make it work with a portrait orientation. It just doesn't look as good. Okay. All right. So to structure something like this, the first thing we think about is, okay, how do we do this arrangement? Because if you just drag and drop components into the viewer, they're all going to be stacked up in a particular way. It's not going to look nice. So what we need here is, first of all, we need a horizontal arrangement. So the horizontal arrangement is going to have 3 chunks. It's going to have one list viewer as one component, another arrangement as the middle component, and another list viewer as the right component. So that's what we'll do first, is we'll drag and drop into the viewer a horizontal arrangement component. So we'll drag and drop this one. There we go. Doesn't look like much because I haven't put in anything into it. Then we go back into user interface and look at list view. Put one into here. And then we have another layout item, which is going to be a vertical arrangement. And we'll stash it into here. Oh, is it in? Yep, it is in. It doesn't look right. Nothing is going to look right until we tweak it. So don't worry about how it's looking right now, because it's going to look awful until we actually do something to fix it. There we go. So they're not even arranged in the right way, because the main reason of this is because a list view has a default width that is taking up too much space. So in this case, I cannot have it to fill the parent anymore. I'm going to have it to, well, let's take a look at horizontal arrangement first. So the first thing we want to do is to make sure that the horizontal arrangement has the width taking up the entire parent. Okay, that's the first thing. The second thing we do is we look at each list view, and then we say, okay, I want to actually specifically control the width of this particular list view. So I want to control it in terms of number of pixels. And I think last time we played around with this one, 80 is not a bad number to start with. So I'm shrinking this one to 80. And then the second list view is going to be the same thing, shrink the width to just 80 pixels. We can always change this back later. But at this point, I need to see the vertical arrangement so that I can drag the vertical arrangement into the middle part, which is where, there we go. So now we have a list view on the left-hand side, a list view on the right-hand side, and the vertical arrangement in the middle. Okay, that's good. And we can see that we got some space in between. We can tweak the spacing stuff later on. I'm not too concerned about that right now. Okay, so according to what we see on the whiteboard, I want 2 buttons in the middle part. So that means I have to drag 2 buttons into the vertical arrangement. So we'll drag one, and then we'll drag another one, like that. Okay, it doesn't look good. Things are not lining up. It's okay. We'll fix the line up part later on. I don't need. I don't want these buttons to be this wide. So instead of having the entire text being this long, I'm just going to use a greater than symbol for the first one. Oops, picked the wrong one. So I want a greater than for the first one and a less than for the second one to indicate which direction am I moving items. Just like that. Are there any questions about what I have done so far? Is that all good so far? Okay. Okay. So now we want to change the list views back to be a little bit wider. So instead of 80, it looks like I can probably do 100 at least. So we'll move those to 100. We can do, we can fine tune this later on, so it fills up exactly. But we have, generally speaking, something like what I want to do. If this is going to take up your entire screen, you want to click on the horizontal arrangement and have the height of the horizontal arrangement to take up the entire screen. So this way, when you go to a particular list view, you can also specify the height to fill the parent, and you'll do the same thing to the other one. So now things are starting to look a little nicer. Okay, I think we can push another 20 pixels with the width. So we'll go ahead and change this one to 120 pixels, and the other one the same thing. So we'll change that one to 120 pixels as well. There we go. So things are starting to look good now. But the two buttons are still, at the wrong place. In other words, they're pushed all the way to the top, where I want it to be kind of more in the middle. So how do we change the two buttons so they're in the middle? Well, there's a trick to do it. There are several tricks to do this. One trick to do this is to use another arrangement. Go to layout and pick one of the arrangements. I don't really care which one you use. It will all work about the same way. So I'm going to pick another vertical arrangement, and we want to put the vertical arrangement right here. And this time, I want to specifically control the width to be just 1 pixel. Doesn't have to be, it doesn't need any actual width. The height is what I want to control. So I want the height of this vertical arrangement to be exactly a certain amount, so that the lineup of the buttons would look right. So I want this to be, I'm just guessing here, maybe around 300. Nope, that's too much. So we want to take it back and go like, well, maybe 150, half of that. Okay, so by adjusting the height of the vertical arrangement, which has no content in it, I can now push the buttons to be at the place where I want it. So this is definitely abusing the user interface components, because I'm just using it to line up something else. But it works. Okay. Are there any questions about how to line up everything so that visually everything looks good? Okay. So if there are no questions, then I'm going to change the names of the list boxes, because I have 2 list boxes. I need to know which one is which one. So I'll rename the first one from list view 1 to list view from. Okay. So this is typically where all the selections start up from, which is on the left hand side. And then the one on the right hand side, instead of calling it just list view 2, we'll also change the name to list view 2. So this is this is eventually what we want to remember as the selected option. So you can say choices versus selection. It's up to you to decide how you want to name your list view. The buttons also need to be named properly. So the first button, which is this one, instead of calling this just button 1, I'll rename this one as button 2 or copy 2. Well, it depends. Okay, we'll say move to, and then this one is move from. Well, I think it's better to indicate the direction. So this is move left. The other one is move right. I think that is probably better. There we go. All right. So now that we have the proper names for the components, we can now start to put some code into it. But before we do that, I want the left-hand side to start with specific items in it to begin with. And that's pretty easy to do, because when you click on a list view, it gives you this option here. This property, which is called elements from string, allows you to specify things that are comma separated. And then each item that is separated by a comma from the next one becomes an item in the list. So that becomes the initial value of the list view, okay, which is what I want to do. So we'll go ahead and specify certain classes here. Okay, cisp300, cisp362, cisp310, cisp444, or 40, excuse me, cisp360, and CISS342. But those are the classes that I can teach over here. So now, it is automatically populated. I don't need to rely on initialize to give the list view on the left-hand side, items to choose from. So are we still doing okay so far with this code? Okay, still okay? All right. So now it's all down to the logic, okay? So when I click the buttons in the middle of this entire application, what do I need to do? Okay, so I have to first select something on one side or the other, and then click one of the buttons. Okay. So we go to the blocks now. There we go. We got blocks on this side, and the trigger of all the operations will be button based. So we have to look into button move right. Okay, we'll do this one first, and select click. So when it is clicked, the first thing I need to do is anything selected on the left hand side? If there's nothing selected, there's nothing to do. So the first thing we want to do is to use a conditional statement, a control in if then, and basically say I only want to do something if something is already selected from list view from. So we look into list view from and say, well, do we know anything is actually selected? So you can see several things about selection. You have selection, and then you have selection index. Okay, so this is really important because if you just use selection, it will only reflect the text that is being selected, not the position of the item in the list. Okay, so in this case, it will give me a class code, which is cisp362, cisp300, and so on and so forth, which is not going to be helpful because I cannot use that to indicate, oh, okay, now this one is gone, and we need to compact the list to remove that item. So I don't need selection. What I need is selection index, which is the number of the item that is being selected. So for people in the back, it's pretty hard to read the text here. It says the index of the currently selected item starting at 1. If no item is selected, the value will be 0. So I can tell whether something is actually selected or not. If an attempt is made to set this to a number less than 1 or greater than the number of items in the list view, selection index will be set to 0, which means if you try to move it to some place that is not valid, it will reset it to 0, and the selection will be set to the empty text. Okay? It's just error handling. Okay? All right, so this is what I need to tell whether something is selected or not. But this by itself is not going to plug in here because it is not a Boolean. It doesn't give you a true or false. So we need to go to math, go to comparison, and the equal works okay. So we'll say if this is actually 0, then, whoops, I want not equal to 0. Okay, if it is not 0, if it's non-zero, that means something is selected and I got something to do at this point. Okay. And if you want to remember why we are comparing, we can just right-click here and say Add Comment. So as the comment, maybe unclick this first, and then we click on comment. We basically say if selection index is 0, nothing is selected. So only do something if an item is selected. Oops, typo. There we go. So commenting is really helpful because you can click the question mark bubble to hide the comment so it's not in the way. But when you need to know, okay, but why did I do this? What does it mean if it is non-zero? Click on the little bubble and you have your own explanation to help you understand. Oh, okay, I remember now. Da, 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 like that. Any questions at this point? Okay. So when we get into the then branch, okay, then we can say, okay, what are we going to do? Remember, we are moving items. Now the idea of moving is you cannot have duplicate items because once you move a class from the left-hand side to the right-hand side, it is no longer a choice on the left-hand side. So that way you cannot select the same class multiple times. Okay, so that's the reason why I use a move instead of a copy. Okay. So we'll go ahead and see, okay, so what do we do to move it on to the right-hand side? You've got a few choices here. The first thing you can do is to actually copy it to the right-hand side, and then delete it from the left-hand side. I would do that first. Okay, I would do it in that order. So that means we have to go to the list view 2 and basically say, now you have one more item. So when you look at the list view and you go through all the things that you can do, you can see that the one thing that might be relevant to what we want to do is set list view 2, which is the name of the list view, elements to something. Okay, so if I just hover over this, the comments or the explanation says list of text elements to show in the list view. This will signal an error if the elements are not text strings. Okay, so this is expecting a list of text strings, but I don't want to specify just a list of text strings. I want to specify a list of text strings of whatever it had before with that one item that I'm also copying from the left-hand side. Is that okay? So that means this list is going to be whatever is already there, which is possibly empty, and one item added to it. Okay? So what we need is, this is certainly useful. We'll drag it out and put it here. The big question is, what do we put here? It is not just any list. It is the merging of two lists, or the list that has one item more than what it has at this point. So let's see. Okay, there are several ways to do this. Possibly, we'll check out which one works best. So I want to check out this option first, because list view 2 has its own elements, which is supposed to be a list. So, oh, okay, this works, nice. Okay, so I don't need that anymore, because I just want to append something to the list. So now to specify the item that I'm adding to the list, I have to go back to the list view from, because this is the source, this is where I'm copying from. So I go back to here, and I only need one element, and the element or the value of the element is reflected by selection. So I go to selection here, yep, this one here. That should do it. So this is basically, adding whatever is selected on the left-hand side to the elements of the list view on the right-hand side. Is that okay? But it does not remove it from the left-hand side. This is only copying. Do you think I should stop here and just test it, or do you think I should go ahead and keep going and see if I can finish the whole thing? Test it first. Very good. All right, so we'll go ahead and test it. I'm going to use the new method of testing, which is starting up an emulator independently. So Android SDK, go to platform, go to tools, and then just run Android. It's going to complain that it cannot update, blah, 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 which I still have not figured out why it is not capable of updating. Because it complains that SSL peer unverified. Okay, but that's okay, I don't need that. I just need to start up the AVD manager and start up the Android virtual device here. Scale display to real size. No, I don't want to do that. Or do I? That might be helpful, because this can help me make the app, the window to be smaller. And let's see whether that's the right density. It might be too small. Because the problem of not scaling it is, it takes up the entire height of the screen, and people in the back cannot see the bottom part of the emulator. And over here, we can go to the same folder, which is
the Android virtual device you chose to do. You said the Android virtual device you chose to do.
Nope, it starts. I think this is a key. If it has this icon, it means it failed to start. But since it did not end up with that icon, we are good. All right, so it is starting up, and this time it does look a little bit smaller than last time, so people in the back can see a little with more details. So with the other command line, I can now start ADB and say start server, okay, the usual stuff. And then ADB devices, just so I can see whether the virtual machine is hooked up or not, and it is already hooked up. It just takes some time for the virtual device to boot and get into the mode where I can actually do something. So meanwhile, I can go back to the browser and build the application, build it into an APK file, just like that. It went through the first 95% really quick. All right, we save the file into the temp folder, that's fine. And hopefully the emulator, oh, it's still starting up. It's a little bit slow. This is way slower than last time. Okay, we'll have the command line ready to go. We just pre-type the whole thing. And multi-select this .apk. I can see it's working. It's just taking way too long to start up. It should have started up already. Okay. Really slow. I don't remember the emulator taking this long to start up last time, or any time in this class. Since we got nothing else to do, I'm going to pass the row sheet. just to pass time. Okay, I think this is taking way too long. I am going to close this and go back to the manager. Create, edit, delete, refresh. Okay, let's see if I can just refresh it and start it again. And this time not scaling, because that's the only difference that from last time. And I'll also wipe user data too, which means all the applications that we have installed already will be gone. Just to see whether it helps, because it's not starting up correctly. It's not appearing just yet. What is that? That's another command line prompt. Okay. So this time the scaling is different from last time. It is a lot bigger. Question is it going to start up correctly? And I can check whether the system is hung up on something or not by typing this command. So I can see that the emulator is working. Well, at least it's consuming a lot of processing resources. Oh, this one does start up. So maybe it's really just one of the settings that I did last time. Okay, so it is working. Good. And now we can get back to the command that is already typed in here. Press the Enter key to have the application installed. There we go. Alright, so now we have the application already installed here. It is called multi-select list. So we click on the application and we can see the classes. The font is really off, we can fix that later on. But I can click something here, nothing happens because nothing is selected yet. I can select one of these, click the button, and it is not getting copied. Did I get the wrong one? Nope, it's not getting copied over here. So the code is not working. Let's go back to the code and figure out why it is not working. So my guess is when we do something like this, it doesn't automatically append it to the list. Okay, so we need something else to set the list. It doesn't automatically append to it. So this is not, or this is the reason why it's not working. So if it's not working, it means I need a local variable, and we'll just call this a temporary list, which is going to be the elements of the right-hand side. And then we put this block back in here, but we perform this operation to temp list, which is the temporary list. And then after this, we'll go back to list view 2, and then use this particular method, or use this particular block to set the elements of the right list box to our temporary variable, which is called temp list. So in this case, what I did to this program is I just created a local variable called temp list, so that the append operation is not done directly to the list of the list view, and instead I'm using a temporary variable to perform all the append operation. And then once everything is done, then I set the elements of the right hand side list view to the local variable. So by going through the temporary variable, I think this should fix the problem. So we'll go ahead and see whether this fixes the problem or not. So we go back to build and build another APK. Now I know for this application, we don't really need to test it using APK, but I just want to go through this exercise because most of you, especially those of you with multiple screens, and also to do the homework assignment, you also need to do multiple screens. You need to use this method. You need to use an APK to test your program. You can no longer use the built-in emulator to test your program. You can see how quickly it can finish the first 95%, and then the next 5% takes longer. Here we go, we save the same name and have the original file replaced. Go back to the command line and just reinstall the application. All right. Back to the emulator and restart the application. So once again, we select, let's say cisp310, or just 310. Click. This time it worked. So that means you cannot append directly into the list of this view. That doesn't work. So you have to go through a temporary variable in order for that to work.
Okay, so what if you add another one then?
What?
What if you add another one now?
What if you add another one?
Like this?
It will keep, if I keep adding, cisp310, it will keep making more and more cisp310 because it is not gone. I can select another one and add it to, just like that. But I haven't. But the program is not done yet, right? Because I did not remove it from the first site after the copying. So we'll go ahead and change that. So now we can go back to the app here and say, okay, this part works, which is good. And now we want to do something, we want to remove the item from the other side. So I'm going to do exactly the same thing, just like this block here. So I'll duplicate this block and just put it here. And I'm going to do the same thing, except this time what I want to do is to change this one to the from view box because I want to remove an item from it. So this is, I'm not adding anymore, so I will take this one out. This is still going to be useful later on, but I'll deal with it later because I'm changing the elements on the left hand side. I'm not adding items anymore. I'm actually deleting items. So we'll see whether we can delete a particular item based on its index. I believe it can be done like this one, remove list item. So now we use remove list item. And the list where the item is getting removed is my temporary variable. The index is now going back to list view from, and then choose the selection index, which is right here. And just put it here. I have no use of that block anymore, so we just throw that away. So this should complete the operation. The first block, which is this one, is copying from the left-hand side to the right-hand side. The bottom block here is removing the selected item from the left-hand side, so I cannot have duplicates to be moved to the right-hand side. Are there any questions about this code? No questions? Okay, so maybe we should give it a try. Find out whether it works or not. So once again, we'll go to build and save the APK file. It's already 100% done, so where's my file? There we go. We'll overwrite the original file, go back to the command line interface, and just repeat the command to upload and install the application. Now it's done, we go back to the emulator, we try it again. So we go to multi-select lists, and this time we'll select cisp362, move it to the right-hand side, and you can see how it disappeared from the left-hand side, which is what I want to do. Okay, so we can now just move items from one side to the other side, well, from the left-hand side to the right-hand side. But the other side is not done yet. Okay, I cannot do the reverse because there's no code corresponding to moving from the right-hand side to the left-hand side. So are we okay so far with this code? Okay, so we have accomplished half of the program. So what do you think we should do with the other half of this program?
Duplicate this code.
Okay, duplicate the code. So, but anytime you say copy and paste, you have to think about, is there a better way to do it? Because copy and paste is generally not a very good idea because one, you're making your program bigger, and two, if this logic has a problem, that means I have two places to fix instead of one. Okay, so we want to take a look at this and go like, well, is there a better way to do something like this? Because I want to do exactly the same thing except the order is opposite, right? Okay, so as it turns out, there is a way to do this. Turn this into a subroutine to make it general. Okay. So I'll show you guys how to do it. And what I'll do is I'll use a procedure and put a procedure here. This is a procedure definition. It's going to involve two items. So it will have quote unquote two inputs. Each input is basically a parameter. And I'll call the first parameter list box from. And then the second one is list box 2, view 2. Let's change the names so they're consistent. So list view from, list view to. Okay. But list view from and list view to are really just two parameters. They can be numbers, they can be true, false values, they can be strings, they can be list views. Okay. So how do we make sure that this program or the subroutine can use these two as list views? Okay, because that's the next thing we want to do, is to make sure that we treat these as list views. So what we'll do is we are going to put all of this stuff here. So I'll make a duplicate and paste everything into here. So this way I can start to modify the code without losing originally what it is. All right. This list view from is not the same thing as that list view from, because the colors are different. So I have a problem now, because I don't want to refer to list view from here. I only want to refer to this one. But this one is not necessarily a actual list view. I have to turn it into a list view and access the selection index item from this particular thing. If you scroll all the way down to any components on the left hand side, you can see any list view. This is the trick, okay? This is how you can get out of this situation. So when you click on any list view, it will give you pretty much the same blocks as the other one. In other words, you can get to the index, selection index, just like this one here. So I'm gonna pick out this one. But instead of just saying the selection index of some known components, the component is now, there's a slot here. This is where you plug in the get list view from. And then what we do is we toss this away and substitute that with this one here. Now this is a slightly more advanced type of app inventor programming. So if you don't want to do this, okay, it's fine, I understand. On the other hand, it does make your program a little bit easier to write, because now you can generalize the code so that you have one single subroutine to copy an item from one list box, list view to another list view. So you don't have to copy and paste the code. But I have to do the same thing to everything else, okay? When I refer to list view to elements, okay, we have to change that using the same method. So we go to any list view and we find out where we can get the elements, which is up here a little bit. Elements, like this one. So we'll put it here in place of what we had originally, okay, and toss the original thing away. And this time we use list view 2 as a parameter and put it into the component. Is that okay? Does everybody see what I just did and how to get it done? And I have to change this one too. This one is referring to the selection of list view from. So I go to any list view and we want to find selection. So it is going to be, it's alphabetically sorted, so it's easier to locate things like this. So we have the selection, we put it here, the original item is going to be tossed away, and then we have list view from as a parameter and stick it over here. This one, we have to do the same thing, because we don't want to actually access list view 2, we want to use this parameter as list view 2. So we go to any list view again, and this time we want to set the selections. So we want to, oh, it may not have that option. Uh-oh. Oh, elements, there we go. Set list view elements. So we will put it here. Temp list is still what we need to do, so we will duplicate this one to over here. The component is going to be list view 2, so we pick out list view 2 as a parameter and stash it over here. Then we have no use of this guy anymore, so we toss it away. Okay. In other words, what I'm doing is I am quote-unquote parameterizing the original code so that now we can have a subroutine to handle all of this. It also makes it easier to replicate the same logic to another application, because this is no longer sensitive to the actual components that you have on the screen, because you are passing the component itself as a parameter. I'll show you guys how to actually run the procedure. Okay. So the second half is going to be the same thing. If I need to access the elements, I need to go to any list view, go to the elements thing, statue here, toss this one away, go back to the parameters, list view from. Oops. No, I don't want to do this. Okay. List view from, get it, and then put it down there. I need a bigger screen. There we go. All right. And then we have to do the same thing here. This is selection index of list view from. So I might as well just replicate this one here, so I can access it later on. So we need a selection index. We go to any list view and get the selection index, which is this one here. And the component that I'm treating as a list view is list view from as a parameter to the subroutine. And then we can put it over here and then toss away the original item like that. And we only got one thing left to do here. I'm just going to be super lazy here and just replicate this block, put it here, and then change the parameter. Instead of list view to, it is going to be list view from. There we go. Then we have no use of the last item anymore. So now the procedure is done. Okay, the procedure that has two parameters, which is the first one is list view from, the second one is list view to. I also want to change the name because the name procedure is not really helpful. So we want to go like from move item move list item. There we go. List view item. There we go. Okay, I think that reflects what the procedure is doing. Okay, so right now at this point we have the procedure, but the procedure is not being used. In other words, the original code that we have in the button click is still here. Okay, but it's no longer needed. I can toss that away now. Okay, we toss away 18 blocks here. Instead, we need to make a call to the subroutine, because the subroutine doesn't do a single thing until you call the subroutine. So over here, when we need to utilize the subroutine, we need to call the subroutine. We go to procedures, and then we say call that particular procedure. But it has two slots. In other words, we need to tell it, okay, but which component is supposed to be the list view from as a parameter, and which one is supposed to be list view to as a parameter. Well, that part is not too bad, because we already know the components. So when we go to list view from, okay, the one element or the one thing that we need to pick is the last one here. So this is list view from, and then the other one is list view to, just like that. So now we are doing exactly the same thing as last time, but we are doing it with a procedure. But before we go any further, I need to make sure that this works, okay? Because otherwise, it just defeats the whole purpose of doing it as a procedure. So we'll double check. We'll build the application, we'll build the APK, and then test it out. So what I just did is kind of what computer programming is about, is when you see that you are copying a chunk of code to do something else with slight modifications, you kind of have to think, is there a better way to do it? And what I just did was to abstract out the common part of the code, turn it into a procedure, so this way I don't have to copy and paste. Okay, so it's all done. Save the file, override the original, go back to my command line, just rerun the program, just rerun the installing. It's all done. Go back to the emulator, and just test it again. Select one, copy, move. So it's all working. Great. So now the other half of the program, which is selecting something from the right-hand side to moving to the left-hand side, can be done with a cinch. Because I already have the logic as a procedure. I just need to call the same procedure again, but with the parameters exchanged. The ordering of the parameter will be exchanged. Okay, so we'll switch back to App Inventor and just finish the program. So now we say, okay, when the other button is clicked, which is the move left button is clicked, then we'll do the same thing here. I'm so lazy because we are calling the same procedure, but we have to flip the parameters. So we are now moving from the right list view to the left list view. That's all I need to do. Now I'm done. Do you guys see why turning some logic into a procedure is helpful? Because to reuse the same logic is just merely calling the procedure again, and you just have to re-specify, oh, but which list box are we copying from, and which one are we copying to? Just switch it around, and we're all done. Is that okay? All right. Okay, so just because I said this is working doesn't mean it's actually working. And one thing that really bugs me is the font size inside the list view, because it looks really reasonable here, but when you look at the actual application, it doesn't look like that at all. Why do you think that is the case? Why is the font so tiny in the actual application when in the preview inside App Inventor everything looks kind of reasonable? Partially, but it also has to do with the actual resolution of the screen, because the Google Nexus 5 device is supposed to be 1080p in terms of resolution, which is really high resolution. And that's why the font is really small. So we want to change that because it doesn't look right, like this. So we'll go ahead and just kind of, modify this a little bit. So we'll change the width to be a little bit wider because we can actually afford it to be a little bit wider. It was 120 before, now we can go up to 130. Same thing with this one, we can go up to 130. And the text size is what we want to change. So if you scroll down here, you can see a text size. I don't exactly know what is the unit of 22. I'm suspecting it is in pixels and not in font size, not in how do you call that, points. Okay, they're not in points. So from what we see in the emulator, we can easily double it. Okay, so we'll change the 22 to a 44 and do the same thing with my other list view so they stay consistent. Okay, there we go. You can also play around with the color. Okay, if the black background is bothering you because you want everything to kind of have a more consistent color, you can just change that. I mean, you can change the background color to something else. We'll change it to a very light gray, and then we'll change the font color or the text color to black. Like that, and do the same thing on the other side. First, we change the width to 130 pixels. And then we'll change the colors. Background color to a light gray, and then the text color to a black color, like that. Okay. Oh, it didn't change. There we go. Whoops, changed the wrong thing. Dope. Okay, text color is good. Okay, it's all good. The selection color is off now, okay, because both will use a light gray as a selection color, which makes it impossible to tell what is selected visually. So we'll change this one to a different color, let's say yellow. There we go. And do the same thing over here. It is also yellow. Okay. Are we good at this point? Okay, so I've changed a few things, making it look nicer, and include the logic to move something from the right-hand side to the left-hand side. So we got several things to test and check out this time. So we go to build, save APK to my computer, and just wait a little bit. How many of you may be using something like this in your application where you have multiple things to select as options? And the one single person who requested is not here. Okay, but I'm glad that other people may find it useful as well. So click OK, save, overwrite, and then just re-upload, reinstall. Now we can go to the emulator, check it out. Right there. Okay. The text color is on one side is not fixed correctly. Okay, but that's kind of like a minor issue. I want to see if I can move something back to the other side, and yes, we can. So this is great. The program is working the way it's supposed to, except for the color of this thing. I cannot see the text on the left-hand side, but it is already correct. It's just no. Okay, this is. Sorry. Did I miss anything? I mean, it doesn't.
Text color was default.
Sorry.
The text color was default. So black.
Okay. Ah, thank you. Very good. Because the default is the white or light gray color, whatever it is. It's just not working. Okay. Okay. Thank you. So that should be working. All right. So if you guys are interested, I'm going to save the AIA file and then upload it to Moodle. So this way you can. The most important part that you need to get is not the component. The component can be yours. The only thing you need to copy and paste into your application is the procedure. And that's the beauty of turning something, a logic into procedure, is now you only have one thing to put into the backpack and copy into your application to make use of something like this. Is that okay so far? All right, so if this is all okay, we'll go ahead and save the project onto my computer using as an AIA file. So save. And then we switch to Moodle, and I'll upload it into Moodle.
So, okay, so here's the question I have. So then the question is that when you're using it, so the question is that, well, once you get the list items into the second list, which is the move to list, right?
Okay.
Once you get them there, would you have to basically look into that list and be like, okay, why don't you tell me what items are already in there?
That's up to your application. I don't know how your application is going to make use of the selected items. So you have to go through that list and find out what is selected and do something with it. Or not.
Okay, because my thing actually was that I was going to use it for the service. Remember, like when they basically, the client goes in, he can say, I want leaves to rake, snow shovel, or whatever. So basically, when you actually do that, would you have to use the selected index, or would you have to say?
No, you have a whole list. So when you have a whole list, you can use any one of the list blocks to access the list.
Okay.
Okay. So let me just upload this file first, because this way you guys have a copy of this. Okay, so we'll call this what did we call this? What was the name?
Multi-select lists.
Multi-select. Okay, there we go. Multi-select lists. AIA. We'll attach it from here. So I'm giving you the AIA file and not the APK file, because this way you actually have the source code and you can do whatever you want. You can just copy it into using the backpack to copy into your application, or you can modify it, add comments to it, do whatever you want to do. Okay. Click save and return. So now it is in Moodle under Advanced Techniques. Are we okay? Are we good? Yep.
Just one question. When you originally set up the list, you put it into the elements from string
Right.
Category, but then when you actually look for it, you have to look for it under elements, not under elements from string.
Correct.
Okay. Because the elements itself
That is correct. When you look at elements from string, there's only one thing you can do. You can only set the elements from string, but you cannot get it back as a string. So this is only good for setting the elements. It's good for specifying what elements do you want to have in a list box. You can use a list you can use text, comma separated text, to specify what elements you want to use in the list. But once you have a list, it doesn't convert it back into a string, not automatically. Is that no?
Okay. Yeah, because otherwise I would look for the elements from string. This guy to be able to take it from the one screen and put it in the other.
Yeah, this is only good for initializing it. Yeah. But once you have items, like the right-hand side, the one that you really care about, you need to get the elements as a list, and then you can process individual items off the list and go, okay, I want to do this if this option is chosen, I want to do this if this option is chosen, and stuff like that.
By the selection index of that particular element.
Yeah, exactly. In fact, let me change this app a little bit so that we can do summation of a bunch of numbers that is on the left-hand side. So we'll go ahead and just kind of modify this application a little bit. In the screen initialized event, I will go ahead and just populate the left-hand side with some random numbers, and then you can select what numbers you want to do. You want to select to the right-hand side, and you click another button to add up all those numbers. Okay, so this way I can show you guys how to make use of the selected items on the right-hand side and how to process it. Is that okay? Any questions? Any objections? Okay. All right. So we're going to do exactly the same thing, or well, not exactly the same thing, but we'll do something about this app here. So the first thing we change is there's no need to pre-initialize everything from here. So I remove all the initialization of the left-hand side because I'm going to put random numbers into it. So that also means in the blocks, I got something to do when the application is starting up or when the screen initializes. So I go to screen 1, I pick out the initialize event, which is here, and just say, okay, we'll put some items on the onto the left-hand side. So to do that, you have to use a loop because we have to kind of say, okay, let's do it several number of times. We go to control, and you can see. Sorry. Yep.
You saved it as a APK file?
I saved it as an AIA file. I uploaded the AIA. Did I upload the wrong file?
I think so, because I downloaded it and it's not letting me import it.
It doesn't let you do what?
Yeah, I downloaded it and it's not letting me import it.
It does not let you import it. Does it say why it doesn't let you import it?
I'm not sure.
Okay, let me just double check, okay, because occasionally I do pick the wrong files to upload. No, it is the AIA file. It should let you upload it.
Let me try again.
Okay. All right, so what we want to do is to do something several times, and we'll pick out the best thing to do is for each item, for each number. I think that will work really well. So just let me know how many numbers do you want to have on the left-hand side. 5. The default is 5. We can change it to 10 if you want. We'll change it to 20, 200. So we have a really long list. Because this way it will also show you, where the scroll bar is going to appear and stuff like that. So, it's not bad. So with 200, we are creating a list of 200 numbers. That's one way to see it. The other way to see it is we are adding, new items into the elements. But it's really best if you just make a list of these elements and then just import the entire list into the list view. Okay. So we want to have a local variable to deal with that. So we use the local variable block, put this one inside here. And once again, I just call this a temp list because it's a temporary thing that I need to do. Eventually, it is, it's just going to be copied into the selection list. So for each loop iteration, all I want to do is to add an item to this temporary list, and the item that I'm adding is just a random number. Go to math, and then go to the random number generator, go here, and we'll just pick out a number from 1 to 100. That's fine, we'll just do that. When this is all done, when I get out of the for each number loop, that means I have a list of 200 items already. So at that time, I can go to list view from and say, hey, your items is now from, okay, set the selection to my temp list, which now is a list of 200 random numbers. That should do it, okay? Are there any questions about this particular logic here? When the screen initializes, when the application first starts, it will go through this loop here. It will go through it 200 times in order to give me a list of 200 random items or random numbers. Okay. So we'll check it out. Make sure that this works first. Okay. Go to build, save APK. This type of programming, which is write a little bit of code and test it, write a little bit more code and test it again, was not even possible, I would say about 30, 40 years ago. It's not possible because you have to submit a job to run a program. And the result of running that program will be available to you the next day as a printout. So you can't do something like this, like, oh, I want to try this out and see what it does. Nope, cannot do it. So this is a relatively new concept that we can do development like this.
So what you're doing now is that you're overwriting the elements from list that you put in the properties of that particular from list view.
Yep. So instead of using a static string to initialize the items on the left-hand side, I'm now dynamically creating a list of 200 random numbers and populate that list on the left-hand side. So we'll see whether that works or not. Go to multi-select list, and uh-oh, it's not working. Must have missed something. Okay, when screen 1 initialize, we have an empty list here. And then we set it to temp list, and then we are adding one item to the list. That is weird. That does not work. Oh, I'm setting the selection. Of course, it's the wrong thing to do. Okay. Because what I need to do, because I'm not changing the selection, I want to change the elements. I got the wrong thing. Okay, there we go. There we go. Because the selection refers to what the end user has selected. I'm not changing that, okay? That's up to the end user to decide. I want to make the elements of the list. I want to initialize the elements. So I got the wrong thing initialized. No wonder. Do it one more time.
So I found a bug in App Inventor.
You found a bug in App Inventor?
You can't have more than one instance of it.
What?
You basically can't have more than one instance of it.
You can.
Yeah, so like basically what it means is like basically what it means like in case you actually have like one instance open, you will want to open up like another project in like another tab window. You can't do that.
Oh yeah, no.
You cannot do that to any app in Android. You cannot run any app in multiple instances in Android.
How would you know which one is the one changes to be?
Say again?
I'm asking Charlie, how would you know which of the tabs should be the one that it changes to?
Well, no, that's what I'm saying.
It's not a bug, it's a feature.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Right.
Yeah, but also you have the option to open two different projects.
is,
Yeah.
the way we're
Hold to see what he was doing, see what I was doing.
Okay, if I understand your question correctly, you're basically saying that Android does not let you start up the app twice as
No.
two.
App Defender won't let him look at your project
The
while
two
he works
different
on his
projects
project.
at the same time.
That is correct.
So that's what I was saying.
But there's a way to get around that one. There's an easy way to get around it.
Using it for your private window.
Yep. All right, so we do have a list, a long list here. So the question is, where's my scroll bar? Oh, that's probably a setting over there, but I can now select items and put it on the other side like that. Okay, so that's good. Okay, so now I want to extend the application so it can actually compute the sum of the numbers that I have selected. Is that making any sense? Yes? No? Kind of? Okay. All right. So then we'll go ahead and do that. And before we fix that, we want to go back to the designer and make the make the list view scrollable. And does it have a scroll bar? Nope. It doesn't have a scroll bar. So a list view cannot scroll. That doesn't seem to make a lot of sense. Okay, I'm not convinced. Okay, let's take a look at a list view and see whether scrolling is not allowed. Okay, this component will not work correctly on screens that are scrollable. Well, so the question is the screen itself scrollable? I don't remember whether I said it or not. Okay. There's also a filter bar. Okay. Okay, all right. So that means, whether the screen itself is scrollable or not is an issue. So we go back to the screen, and then we say the screen itself is not scrollable, which means the list view should give me the ability to scroll, but it's not doing that. All right. Okay, no big deal. We'll deal with that later. We'll add another button into the center part here, and I'll just say to add, okay, like that. And we'll change the name of the button just to add. Button add, like so. And I want to make this application fancy. In other words, I don't want the result of the sum to show on this screen. I want to show it on the second screen. Okay, so I want to do the computation on the second screen and show the result on the second screen. So when I get to the code of this particular screen, I am going to start with button add. When clicked, is going to start a second screen. So we go to start screen, open another screen with start value. And the start value, okay, first of all, we need to specify the next screen. I haven't really made the next screen yet, but apparently I'm going to make the screen name just screen 2. Very inventive here, creative. The start value can be anything, can be a list. So I will just go to my list view 2 and say, hey, give me all your elements. And I'll send all of those to the second screen as a list. That's all I'm going to do on this particular screen. Then I make a new screen called screen 2 to do all the adding and tell me what the answer is supposed to be. So screen 2 doesn't need a whole lot of stuff. All it needs is just a label that shows me the result of the calculation. So we'll just say result is here. That's all it needs to do. So now we go to the blocks of the second screen and go to the initialize part of screen 2. And then we say, okay, give me the list of numbers that I'm supposed to add. Okay. So that is going to be get start value. And I'm going to use a local variable. Well, we'll use 2 local variables, one for the list itself, the other one for the sum. So we'll definitely need a local variable block. We'll need 2 local variables. We'll change the names. The first one is the sum itself. The second one is going to be the list of numbers. So I'll say list of numbers. Like that. The list of numbers is really just the start value of the second screen. The sum is going to be initialized to 0. So go to math, just put a 0 here, just like that. So now we want to go through all the items of list of numbers. Okay, list of numbers, plural, like that. And add every single number to sum. There's a quick and easy way to do this, because when you look under control, look under the for, there's one particular for structure just to deal with all the items in the list. So this is the best way to do it, because now I can say, take a look at all the items in list of numbers. For each number, go ahead and add the value of that number to sum. So we go back to variables. We want to set sum to the sum of whatever sum has at this point, which is a running sum, and the item itself, which is going to be an item from the list. When this is all done, I want the label to reflect the answer. So label 1 set text, or set label 1 text after the loop to actual sum. And I think that's all I need to do. Are there any questions about what I'm doing in the initialize event of screen 2? Just to do the summation, reflect the answer, that's all I wanted to do. Okay, so we'll build the app again. If there are no questions, we'll build the app and test it, just to make sure that works. The reason why I do this, in a fancy way using a second screen, is also to help you do your homework assignment. In case you haven't done it already, this is going to be helpful. If you have done it already, then you go like, oh, okay, it's the same kind of code. All right, so we got the app. Come on, give me a file. Give me a file. Go. Save, replace. Go back to my command line to do the upload and installation, or reinstallation. And then switch back to the emulator. Click on it. And, oh, there is a scroll bar. I saw the scroll bar earlier. It was here, and then it disappeared. Huh? There we go. So you can drag it and make it scroll. Okay, so the scroll bar is working all along. So we'll pick some items and just, oops. That works. Because there's nothing on the list. The sum of nothing is 0. So that works. But we do want to make sure that it does work when there are specific values. So we'll just go ahead and pick some random numbers onto the right hand side. So we just have to guesstimate, what is the sum of these 4 numbers. So about 110.
245.
Huh?
245.
You're fast. 245. So we'll check. 245. Yay! You got it. All right. So this is an interesting little app that I morphed over the course of this entire class. But every time we morph it, we are just demonstrating one additional idea. But I hope the finished form of this particular application gives you an idea of how you can select items from a selection list, option list, and what you can do to process the selected items once they're all selected. Is that good? Okay. All right. And by the way, this screen can serve as a screen 2 as well. So the return value back to whatever screen started this one can get the list. Do you see what I mean? So this can be helpful because this takes up the entire screen. I don't imagine you can do anything else in this screen. That's fine. But whatever is selected from this screen, it can serve as the return or the result back to the screen that it came from. So let me just kind of finish this, just so I can show you what to do with that one, which also relates to the homework assignment. Okay, so we go to screen 1, and then we say, oh, what if someone presses the back button? Okay, So that can be captured, because when the back button is pressed, it is this particular event here. So when the back button is pressed, you can pass the entire list of the right-hand side list view back to whoever started the screen. Now, we know this is screen 1, and technically speaking, whoever is getting the result is not in the same application, but this works in general, okay? So what you want to do is go to Control, and then you go to Close Screen with Value. There we go. With Result, okay? So the result, in this case, is just going to be the elements that we have at this point in List View 2. There we go. That's all you need to do. So this mechanism allows you to pass the selected elements of the list view on the right-hand side to whatever screen starts this one. Now, this is screen 1 already. Isn't this kind of useless and pointless? Not entirely. Because in Android, you can have one app to start another app. Okay? And if both apps are App Inventor apps, I think you can actually pass a list from one app back to the original app. Now, in this class, I haven't really talked about it, how to start an application from inside an App Inventor app. It's pretty easy. You go back to the designer, and it is in, okay, I just have to remember where it belongs. It's a start activity thing. It may be just,
It is under the activity starter.
sorry?
It's under activity starter.
Activity starter. Oh, there we go. Okay. I was staring it in the face. There we go. So if you choose an activity starter component, it gives you the ability to start anything from your application. In other words, you can start the phone app if that's what you want to do. You can start the browser if that's what you want to do. You can start another app that you write if that is what you want to do. So when you close screen 1 in one application, the result that you specify is actually being passed back to the application that started your application, if there's one. So that's really kind of neat and useful, but this is a little bit complicated in many ways, because how do you specify which app you're starting? So you have to kind of play with all of these different properties of an activity starter. It comes with a bunch of examples as well. If you Google it, you will also find lots of help demonstration. But this is what we are looking at here. Event race after this activity starter returns. So this will give you the result back from the other application. So this is a pretty useful feature. When you start another application, you get to specify which screen of the other application that you want to get to. So it actually is kind of flexible. We'll talk about this on a different day, but I just want to make you aware of the fact that your application, your App Inventor application, can start anything in Android. Okay. So are there any questions about the stuff that I demonstrated today, which actually should help with your homework assignment? No questions? No questions about what homework assignment we're talking about? Yep.
No, when I was testing the first app that you did through the AI emulator,
Yeah.
I was getting an error, and it was saying that the element had a 0, but that it had to have at least 1 at the starting. So I wasn't sure if that was just the AI.
You mean the app today?
Yeah.
Yes, because when you, the first one? The one with all the fixed...
Yeah, the CISP back and forth. It still moved it, but then it would come up with this error, and I didn't know if that was something just that emulator getting picky, or if it was something that we would need to worry about later on.
You do, because the thing is that according to what the code said,
ask you the question, when did you get that error? When you click the button?
Yeah,
Or
so.
when it first starts?
No, when you click the button, so you choose the items on the left side.
Right.
Go to move it to the right, and they move, and then behind it would say there's an error. But it didn't break. It still moved, and it would go back and forth.
Mm-hmm.
Didn't break, but I didn't know if that was something that needed to.
Were you making changes to the blocks or anything in App Inventor at that time?
No, I killed the emulator and rebooted it just in case
Uh-huh.
it got the same.
Okay. I'm suspecting there's some kind of communication between App Inventor and the emulator in the back end. So they're trying to synchronize, the content of the list boxes. But since you're actually making changes to the list boxes while the app is running,
Okay.
I'm guessing that is causing some kind of misunderstanding.
Okay.
If you build the APK,
Yeah.
that should work even in the old emulator.
Okay.
Because
and that's what
I
I'm
think-
just starting to. I didn't get that far through it yet. But.
Yeah, but I'm suspecting it has to do with the constant update and synchronization between App Inventor and the emulator when you go through the AI starter method.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yep.
That makes sense.
All right. Any other questions? No other questions? How many people want the new version of the multi? Okay. All right.
Yeah.
New version of what?
I'm just gonna upload the
Maybe
latest
that.
version. That's all. All right. So the lecture portion is all done. If you have, you're more than welcome to stay here to work on your project and work on your homework assignment. But the lecture portion is all done. Place and go back to here and replace this one too. Just click this guy, delete, and re-upload. Because if you guys don't have any questions, I'll just keep watching Ken block videos. This time I think I'll go to Dubai.